Last week, we began to look in some detail at the major pieces of what we believe to be the business model of the modern church. Those pieces that we looked at are an over-reliance on paid staff to provide some kind of an experience or even entertainment for the consumers, otherwise known as the audience or those who come to services. The second thing we looked at was an over-reliance on preaching and teaching at the church for virtually all of one's spiritual formation and education. And I talked specifically then about, our lack of use of what we call the spiritual disciplines during the week, our lack of use of Bible study, of prayer, of meditation, of, however it is that you like to practice any of the spiritual disciplines. There's a general lack of that in a business-like model church. And then thirdly, an over-reliance on marketing to bring in new members and visitors. There's a lot of money spent on marketing, and people pay companies and businesses to market the church for them. And then added to these three would be a fourth, and that would be over-reliance on programs of various kinds to keep members busy, giving them the feeling that they're truly accomplishing God's work. If you haven't been able to tell by now, I don't have a lot of fondness for at least some of what the business model church is, and that's what this class is all about, is taking a look at that and looking what's the alternative. What does the Bible really say about church and how it's organized and so on. Well, we looked in some detail at the paid staff part of the equation as well as the preaching and teaching part, and we ended class last week with some statistics from the Barna Research Group regarding biblical illiteracy. You remember those questions? Among those who claim to be Christians. And some of those numbers that Barna gave, I thought, were rather disturbing, and frankly, they were disappointing. Now, I don't know how they actually chose the people that they chose, those 1,000 and some people to do that research, but it seems disappointing to me. Now, today, we're going to look at marketing and programs, parts of what we believe constitute a business-like church. Let's look at marketing. In a business-like church, and we've talked some about this, in a business-like church, we would expect to see some kind of competition with other churches to put on some kind of a worship service and to plan events that would attract people to our congregation, maybe instead of one of the others. Those worship services and those events would naturally have to become more and more attractive to those who do go to church so that they'll continue to come to our congregation rather than go somewhere else. We would also see churches that really don't have much enthusiasm for evangelism or evangelistic efforts. We instead would devote much of the time as a business-like church, and our effort would go into continuing to plan and hold special events, services for our members in the hope that people might naturally continue to gravitate to our congregation instead of our making disciples as we go into the world. We would tend to plan events and so on to hold the members we have and perhaps gain some new ones. We'd also see a watering down of the gospel message. And that's really one of the disappointing ones to me. The gospel message we would morph that message into something a little more palatable, something more pleasing to those who attend. Because after all, if you stop and think about it, the pure gospel message is exclusive in nature. It calls us to die to ourselves. It calls us to, it lets us know that we may well suffer for the sake of the gospel. The pure gospel message mandates that we love our neighbor. That's kind of tough to do sometimes. That we'll have an attitude of perseverance and of running the race to the finish. Those things aren't indicative of a leisurely life that's filled with worship experiences each Sunday, blessing, entertaining church services, physical abundance, that kind of thing. The gospel message doesn't cater to that kind of thing. And we would possibly see some members and visitors alike acting like customers, complaining about this or that, the song selection, the demanding that the coffee pot never run dry, or, well, here maybe, you got to come back here for the coffee, but, it does run dry up front. Expressing displeasure with the sermon topics or the length of the sermon, the song selections, the lengthy prayers, other similar things. We might also see an abundance of what's in it for me kind of an attitude and an I need to be fed kind of an attitude. In other words, church would be all about the customer. What the customer wants, what the customer doesn't want. The idea of worship in humility and bowing down for the Creator is far from the minds of customers and, for that matter, the leaders in many of the business-like churches. I'm going to close this part of the lesson with words from a guy by the name of Mike Livingston. Mike is a Christian writer. He's a preacher, and he's been a missionary to Kenya. I've edited his comments here to better fit the time we have, and I'm going to quote him. The great heresy of the church today is that we think we're in the entertainment business. We should be concerned that so many people in our churches want to be entertained while they worship. We should be concerned when we no longer recognize the difference between the two. We should be concerned by the growing belief that adding more entertainment value to worship is necessary for the church to accomplish its mission. I may stand alone, but it grieves me when I see worship services characterized more by props, performances, and pep rally atmospheres. I don't know why I have this frog in my throat. Than by any sense of divine sacredness and hallowedness giving way to shallowness. Who or what is the spotlight really on? If the figurative spotlight in our church services is on anyone other than God, it's not worship. I'm still quoting. If the spotlight shines brighter on human performance than on the gospel of Christ, it's not worship. If anyone other than Jesus is receiving our adulation and applause, it's not God we worship. That means you don't have to tell Curtis he did a good job. No, What message are we communicating? The message of the church, the message that the world needs to hear from us is not come and have a good time, come and be entertained, or come and find your best life now. The message of the church is the message of the cross. Lest we forget, Jesus' cross was a source of entertainment only for those who mocked him as he hung on it. And then number 3, how our lives changed. Some may argue that some of these methods win people. Winning them to what? To true discipleship? To cross-carrying? To self-denial? To separation from the world? To crucifixion of the flesh? To holy living? To nobility of character? To a despising of the world's treasure? To hard self-discipline? To love for God? To total commitment to Christ? People are hungry. They are hungry for a diet of substance, not candy. More of the Word, deeper into the Word, unquote. Okay, let's go one more and take a look at over-reliance on programs kind of quickly. Business-like churches often compete with each other for customers by developing and improving various programs. Youth programs, VBS, benevolence programs, and so on. People tend to church shop based on what programs are available. As a corollary to that, one notable outcome of that kind of church is that people will also tend to view their relationship with God as solely a personal thing. That relationship being something that is done in private, disconnected from anyone else. And again, I'm not saying all programs are bad. We have programs here, as far as that goes. If we don't like the programs of a church, we can move to another church where the programs more fit our felt needs. And as far as our relationship with God, well, that's that's a private thing. It's none of your business what I do during the week. It's none of your business to know whether I'm generous with the resources that I've earned. It's none of your business whether I pray, study, and meditate regularly. For that matter, it should be none of your business if I decide to go somewhere else to church, or even if I decide to just have a quiet time on Sunday morning, somewhere at home or in a park or something instead of coming to services. After all, I was up late last night celebrating in Old Town, and I'm a little under the weather this morning. So what's wrong with those things? When we look at the New Testament concept of church, we find that we're not supposed to be a bunch of disconnected individuals that happen to show up at the same place at about the same time. We're family. We're a body. We're all interconnected in ways that make the body function properly. The power in any congregation is in the unity of that group with the Holy Spirit working in and through all of us together in one body. We've been through this before. We've talked about this before. It seems to me that the Bible's clear in terms of how God's people are to relate to and interact with one another. Comments, questions before we go on?
I think the comments are real good. I've had customer service classes. I agree with you on the customer service.
Okay, you're going to have to speak up.
I agree with you on the customer service. That was
Okay.
good. Good endpoint. There's sometimes the customers can get a little off, like, thank you, have a nice day. I don't need to tell you what I'm doing. And I certainly agree with you on that.
Yeah, it becomes an individualistic thing. It becomes you're your own. You are your own, and unlike a family, you don't share with anyone else.
Yeah, I could decide I don't want to share, and I don't want people to know what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have become a society that's addicted to entertainment. That seems to be what drives us. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, we have to have our phones, we have to have our TV, we have to have our entertainment, bands, whatever. And I think it is poured over into our worship services.
And what Ann said, in case you didn't hear, is that she said we've become a society that is addicted to entertainment. You know, we have our phones and we have our TV, we have our Netflix, we have our whatever, and that has spilled over into our spiritual lives.
You look at the big churches, and what draws all of those people there mainly is the entertainment factor. The band, the on stage, it's just another source of entertainment from what I have observed on TV.
Yeah, your observation. Yeah, and I'm not here to, we're not here to disparage all other churches by any means. That's not the point of this. That's not. And it's interesting you said in the big churches, kind of with, I think your thing on that was we're not a big church, and we're not here. Now, if we'd be in Scott City, Kansas, or Elkhart, Kansas, we'd be a big church, okay? But we're not. So, yeah, I get it. Anything else?
I heard one time, what you win them with, you can lose them with.
Yes.
So what you win them with, if that ever changes or goes away, you're going to lose them with that too.
Yep.
So you just...
What you win them with, you can lose them with. Yeah.
Or a society that's like on instant gratification. We want that right now, right here.
Yeah, and if we don't get it, then we'll go somewhere where we can find it, I guess. Yeah. Okay, so Has someone else?
And
Okay.
people get a little demanding sometimes, you know, when they really want something.
I get it, yeah.
So is your definition of entertainment for purposes of this class, those things that you were just mentioning in terms of being more focused on the entertainment than on the message?
Again, I'm not here to disparage other churches who may have these kinds of things. I think, boy, Amy, I think it's a good question, but I think the determining factor of entertainment versus worship, let me put it that way, is in the hearts of people. I think it's more in the hearts of people. I don't know that, you know, having someone get up and sing a solo, or having a guitar or a band or whatever. Or having some kind of, or even having a smoke machine. I don't know. I don't know that that's necessarily all bad, particularly. But I think it's what that church is trying to convey into the hearts of the people who go. Are they trying to convey, and do the people accept it as a worship experience, or is it more of an entertainment factor for them? I don't know that I can judge the hearts of people. I think I can judge my heart, sort of, but I don't know that I can judge the hearts of everybody else, nor can I really judge a congregation or a church. You know, we may talk bad about them, thinking in some respects that, well, we don't do all of that, so we're better. We better watch out when we start thinking that, because we're not any better than anybody else. You know, did I answer your question, or did I work around it sufficiently?
I feel like the hole got dug deeper, to be honest, by that answer. So, yeah.
Melody.
Sometimes I think we think this is a new problem, and I don't think it is. Paul was addressing those who are speaking to itching ears, right? And preachers who were satisfying and giving the people what they wanted to hear rather than what they needed to hear. The methodology can be a skit, and if that skit clinches me and I realize, oh my goodness, I've done that. That's not entertainment, because I don't enjoy having my toes stepped on, whether it's by a skit or by a song or whatever. But when it steps on my toes and I realize I have done that sin, that's not entertainment. That's a message that we often don't want to hear. But when the song or the skit or whatever is just making me enjoy myself and satisfying what I want to hear rather than what I need to hear, then it becomes entertainment. And it was true for first century as much as it is for now.
Which is why I'm not disparaging skits and videos and all of that. Not at all. Not by any means. Okay, Amy, I'm going to sort of turn it around. Can you answer your own question?
No. Because I 100% believe that the church is a business. I don't really buy into the fact that, I mean, I understand it's supposed to be a family, but I don't buy into the fact that any type of congregation with more than like 50 people can really manifest itself as a family without having those business models behind it. Because, you know, we do look at things like the programming, and those are things that necessarily we're not necessarily focused on. That's not our intent, but those are things that we offer to people, which makes it, you know, then into some sort of business model. We do have leadership in terms of the church, which makes it more of a business model. Like you mentioned before about the 501c3, all those things. So I do feel like the church is fundamentally more a business than it is a family, because we are geared towards our consumers as our membership. And we do things purposefully to teach them in a way that we know might not necessarily be offensive, but to communicate that message. But we're also not going to just radically go out and be blunt with people, you know? So I don't know. I don't really agree that I feel like the church in any type of congregate setting is a family.
And you are correct. And I think if you'll recall, I talk about an over-reliance on programs, an over-reliance on marketing, an over-reliance on, not just a reliance on, but an over-reliance.
But that to me is individualistic, because there are things that, I disagree that the church does, but they might be really beneficial or they might be really meaningful to someone else. So you can't just necessarily make that blanket statement and say that the church is over relying on it when I don't feel like we are, but maybe he does.
Someone else may be.
Right.
Yeah.
I also have been thinking about this for a while, and I mentioned it in small group last week, that I also feel like if the church was not a business, we would not gear what we do and have in our minds, if we say this or if we do this, then we can automatically exclude X amount of money from the budget because we know these people are going to leave. Or we're not going to do that because we'll make this person angry and they won't give money to us, and we know that this is their average contribution. So, and the church does that.
I will tell you, and yes, I will tell you that this particular congregation, however, in the years that I have been an elder and on staff, has gone through that and has said, if they need to go, they need to go. And we're not going to change what we do.
Yes,
You
but
know.
that's, again, a business thought and not a family thought.
Yeah.
Because a family thought would be, what can we do to keep them in our family?
And sometimes there isn't anything you can do. Sometimes there isn't anything you can do.
Yeah, I think there's a distinguishing between what is our intention with what we're doing. Is our intention to make disciples and deepen disciples, or is it to just grow the institution? That's where I think there's lots of different ways that you can do discipleship, lots of different ways you can grow the institution. And kind of just which one are we really focusing on? If we just want to grow the institution so we have a successful running enterprise, then obviously our heart would be in the wrong place. But if our intent is both to make and to deepen disciples in Christ, it is inevitable. You're going to have principles that carry over from business. Anytime you have an organization, you have organizational principles. So you're not going to get away from that. But I think it does matter what our real intention is to build a successful enterprise or to focus in on making and deepening Christians. And so that, I think, is where it kind of depends on the intention of what we're doing. And sometimes it can get easy to get caught into, well, we like success, so we want to make this institution, but you're going to have organization one way or the other. Anytime you have a mass of people, it has to be organized somewhere.
And I think Amy, I think that's what makes this really kind of a nebulous thing. Is you have it all. I think a lot of it, most of it, all of it, whatever, depends depends on the intention of the heart, depends on the intention of the collective hearts of the leadership, the collective hearts of the members, and the individual hearts of the members. And each one of those members and each one of those leaders, for that matter, is going to have a little different take on the way it is or the way it should be. And I got to be careful, Mike. I don't want to have to justify what I say.
I'm reminded of the person painting themselves in a corner.
But really, it does come down to, I think, to intentions of the heart, whether collective, whether individual. And there may be some that come here to be entertained. I don't know. Eric is pretty good entertainment sometimes, and Curtis can be at times with some of the stories he tells. But I don't know that that's why. I'm not sure that's why exclusively people come.
Even families function differently. my mother's family was very big, even though I had no cousins or aunts and uncles, because both my parents were only children. But we'd go to my mother's stuff, and it was non-structured. All right, whenever we went to whatever family reunion happened to be taking place. I don't even know that it was called a family reunion. It was just like everybody gathered and there it went.
And whatever, yeah.
When the first time I went with Eric to a family reunion from Mary's side of the family, they had minutes. They had minutes that were taken and they were read from the year before, and it was not that they were less of a family than this unstructured group was. They just liked structure. So you can't just label and say. It's always going to be what is the intention of the heart and who is the focus of our gathering. And if it's not God, then we're off target.
Anybody want to dig the hole even deeper? Are you deep enough?
I think
Mike spoke up.
yeah, I'm in trouble now. Who is it, Paul, that said, whatsoever things are good, whatsoever things are just, think on these things.
Right.
And I think that gives us a bit of a broad brush to try to seek his will by changing a program or trying something. I don't know how else to put that.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying experiment. You definitely don't leave God out of the church. But, and you don't get deep into entertainment necessarily. But that gives you, it's where your heart is in this.
And I'm going to stop for just a minute here, and this is not on my paper. I'm going to stop for just a minute here. These last several class sessions, I want you guys to know, and ladies to know, that I have really appreciated your comments and your questions. I think from what I'm hearing, my expertise at giving, my expertise at telling is limited. But I think even in spite of the limitations of what I am saying, I think you all are getting it. I think from the comments, especially this morning, I think you all are getting what my intent is, even though I may not be very good at actually expressing that. And I just so much appreciate, you don't know how much I appreciate the fact that, at least in my mind, you all are getting what what we're trying to get across here. And I thank you for that. Yes, ma'am.
I want to say, first of all, to that end, I think it's amazing that we're sitting here talking about it. I think that should be applauded. And for me, regardless of where we end up at the end of this class session, I am here, sitting here, particularly because this congregation is willing to ask some hard questions and look at things in a different way and question it and talk about it. And I don't even know where we're going to end up, but I know 5 years from now.
I don't know either where we're going to
I know, but I know 5 years from now, we're going to be moving forward as a congregation, looking and seeking and trying to reach people's hearts. Maybe not the way we used to, but maybe a new way. And for me, I find that very heartening, and I am encouraged by it. I'm excited about it, and whether I agree with what is said here or not said here, or I'm just excited to be in a place that we can have this conversation, and eldership leaders are open to this conversation. And so That's my first thing. I think I kind of lost my other one. Oh, the other thing I was going to say is, for me, when we have this conversation, I think we are so focused on Sunday morning and worship, because I think we need to stop calling it church and start calling it worship. We come here for an hour to worship, but that's not church.
Are you digging the hole even deeper?
No, it's not. I'm not digging my hole. I don't know whose hole. This is me. We come here, what we just did for 45 minutes is worship. It's not church. And so words mean something. How you define a word and how I define a word may be two different ways, and we can sit there and argue about it, but that's the wrong conversation to have, because we haven't even defined what we're talking about. So, for me, what we did was worship, and that's different. For me, that's different than what this conversation here is about. To me, this conversation here is what Curtis was saying. It's about making disciples. It's about making church, the body of Christ that is together, something other than just worship. And you have to go beyond, to me, what I have been doing for the last 30 years. I think you have to go beyond that.
Why aren't you up here?
I don't know. Because I'm only comfortable talking from here.
As kind of a corollary to what you and the others have been saying, if you remember, between Rick and Curtis, we had inter-ministry partners here, and names are terrible. Who? Mark Frost was here. I'm sorry, Mark. I apologize. I knew that. Mark Frost was here, and at least one of the sermons he gave, and I think he talked about this more, and he talked about it with the elders and leadership, was that you as a congregation need to decide where you're going in the future. And, you may, as a congregation, grow in this place. You may, as a congregation, continue to decline. And if you make a decision on a continuing decline, if you make that decision that you can't be here anymore, that's okay. If that's what God wills and that's how that works out. And I don't have any problem with what Mark said, but I distinctly recall thinking and telling more than one person when I was asked to be an elder, and at my appointment as an elder, I recall distinctly that I decided on my own that it's not my intention to be someone who helps to preside over the demise of this congregation. And I have struggled with, as one of the guys who helps make the decisions, I have struggled with how that looks and how that works and how that might be. And we've tried several things over the years. One of the things that stands out was the Jim Fly time. We tried various things. We tried that kind of thing, and there are other things we've tried as well. We've ramped up our benevolence program from what we used to have. We put the Paxton Blessing Box out here. We're continuing in Franklin Elementary, and we have people volunteering to go over there and so on. And we've done all this. We've brought Curtis in and so on. But I continue to have that in my head, what I said, at least to myself, that it's not my intent to preside over the locking permanently of these doors. And this class, this thought, these things that are here, that's one of the things that we've thought of, and I specifically have thought of, to is this where I need to go with this? And I think that, and I'm speaking kind of, in tangents here as well, more than any other class that I have planned, and I've planned quite a few classes since Scott Waltman left, more than any other class I have planned, I got the impression I think from God, that this class, this teaching, is something that we really need to do. We really need to have this conversation. And God doesn't appear to me over in the corner of my office, and I don't hear voices. None of that kind of thing. But there was kind of a compelling nudge to do this class and to have these conversations. I have, and I'll be honest with you, I've never had that kind of a nudge before in any of the classes that I've come up with. So that's kind of where we are with this. Julie.
This is kind of tangential to what you're saying, but I hope it will help. As most of you know, I did not grow up in the Church of Christ. I visited like a gazillion churches through my young childhood and young adulthood. And when I came to the Church of Christ, I felt like it was the first place that asked me to be responsible for my relationship with God. It asked me to be a part of the equation. And I hadn't felt that in other places. And I particularly feel that here. But I could not grow without these kinds of things happening. I couldn't grow without the sermons and the classes and the programs that let me make mistakes, let me challenge my thinking, let me go down a path and bring me back carefully. So it's me. I have to be responsible for that, but I need all of you to help me make that happen.
What brought you to this congregation?
Jim Avan.
See, I personally feel that that's our responsibility to spread the word and encourage people and bring them down and show them what it's all about. I don't know what kind of programs we're talking about, but I still think it's a personal thing, one-on-one, just like that.
It is. And I think, as I said last week, Ann, that sometimes that's a very slow and kind of cumbersome and a 2 steps forward and 1 step backward process to bring even one person to the point that they make a commitment both to God as well as to the church family. It's not something, maybe some people respond within the course of a 30 minutes Bible study, but there are many others that look at many other things, and they look a lot at the relationships, and they look a lot at, do people really care about me, and is this, and sometimes that takes a while. Okay, the bell rang. My next point is, where do we go from here? And I'm going to save that for 2 weeks, but what I do want to do is, in this, where do we go from here? Yes. Where do we go from here? We're going to take a long look at John chapter 6. John chapter 6 is the story of the feeding of the 5,000. I think we're going to find some things in that story that will surprise us, because we traditionally have not looked at some of those things. And you'll look at that story at first and you'll say, what does that have to do with what we've been talking about? But I think once we get through that, I think you'll see what that has to do with what we've been talking about. And so if you want to, over the next 2 weeks, do a little bit of study on John chapter 6 and the story of the feeding of the 5,000, we're going to go through that, and we're going to see how that might have an effect on us today if we'll take in the teaching that's there. Any other comments? I know we've had the second bell.
That's right, no Sunday school this Sunday, right? No Sunday school after church, right?
Right, next week. Terry, you've been silent this morning.
Well, I've been trying to think of what I could say that makes any sense.
Well, so have I, to tell you the truth.
This morning, as we pulled into the parking lot, there was a gentleman that came in on a Harley. You don't often see that, but he came in. Now, Harleys only sound like Harleys, right? Anyway, so just right next to us, and so we introduced ourselves, Sue and I, and his name is Will Childers. And he said he doesn't live far from, he said in some Victorian type house not far from here. And I spoke to him a little later, and he said that this is his third time to visit here. And I encouraged him to come back, and he says, I will. He said, you are so friendly here. And he said, I will bring my, I think he said his family or his children, which is his family, next week. And so I thought, well, you know, we comprise the church. You know, can we go wrong on anything that we study? This is history. This is reality. And I guess there's a fair amount. People don't normally pick this up for entertainment. They pick it up because they have a void or an emptiness or something that's driving them. You know, God put in every person's mind, whether they realize it or not, the need to connect somewhere with a creator or somebody. And so it's interesting. All this, I think as was stated, you know, we can play church, but that's really not. A few years ago, I got to thinking about it. When they say go to church, I thought, you know, I worship. I thought, really, it's worship. So I try to use the expression when we go to worship instead of go to church, because church kind of seems like a thing that you do.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does. I really think it does, you know. Yeah, it does. Okay, we got to go. We're late. Thank you, Terry. We're late. Say hi to Shauna.